Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are watching our webinar from. And I'm Ellen Ermer, and along with Manny Veloso, we coordinate these Lean Enterprise Division webinars. And today we have David Tweedt.
Okay. Ellen, can you see my screen?
I can.
Perfect. So thank you, everyone who's on today. My name is David Tweedt. I am the president and CFO of Win Enterprises. Just to give you a little bit about my background, I have almost 30 years of experience in a number of different roles. The common thread has been working with and driving companies to a much higher level of performance. You can see, here I'm here with my family, my lovely wife and daughter, and what really excites me when I work with various companies is helping them to lay out what are the different strategic elements to put in place, in what order, that'll really drive the bottom line improvement, which we are all striving to achieve. A little bit about Win Enterprises. We are a team of business leaders that really focus on helping the business owner or business leader transform you, your team, and your company. And what we also focus on are 4 different elements. One being the revenue. Second is the profit, which we're going to really dig into deep today. Cash flow, and then higher valuation. So far, and we really like keeping a tally. We've helped our clients find over $154 million and counting. So, we also enjoy writing books to share the knowledge with various, either as contributing authors or the entirety of the book. So you can see we've written a number of books on the right-hand side, and what we practice has been highlighted in a couple common books. Gemba Kaizen and Lean Thinking are 2 books that feature the Wire Mold Company, and that's where I started my career. And the first 11 years of my career at Wire Mold, learning the nuances of how to drive double-digit productivity year over year over year. So, give you an example of various companies we've worked with that Win Enterprises. You can see some are smaller businesses, couple $1 million, to multi-billion-dollar companies, and the principles that we share with all these companies are relatively the same. How they're applied may vary from company to company. We've spent time in various countries as we're helping our clients. So, we can say that we've done a fair amount of international work. However, the majority of our work has been in the US. So let's talk about the problem that we're really digging into today. The problem is that business follows the laws of nature. So as a business, you're either growing and flourishing, or you are decaying. Now, that element just by itself, that can be a little daunting. Then we add the compression of time. Everybody wants things faster. The acceleration of communication and rising expectations for everyone on the call today. And everyone, we have a pressure cooker. So within that, here's another bit of statistic on why what we're talking about today is so important. Is if you look at the S&P 500 and you look at the average lifespan, here's what's interesting. In 1965, the average tenure of companies was 33 years. By 1990, it dropped to 20 years, and it's forecasted to drop to 14 years by 2026. So what does that mean? That means that the rapidly growing companies out there are the younger ones. These are not the companies that have been around for hundreds of years. These are the companies, the rapidly growing companies are the disruptors. So, a lot of individuals say, well, that's not going to happen in my industry. I would challenge you to say it's happening in almost every single industry where disruptors are coming in and they are shifting market preference. Now, what does that mean for all of us? That means that, we need to get faster servicing our customers and at a higher profit so we can challenge some of these disruptors. In addition, you have AI and machine learning. Now, what does that mean? It means that a lot of us need to learn a new way of thinking, understand what is AI doing and what does machine learning, how does that bring value to my company and how the company services or provides products to our customers. It's important to know what are the different dynamics going on in industry. Now, with all that being said, I'm going to tell you there is hope. And the hope is that in a rapidly changing world, we all want to look at and understand what is the profit and performance potential for my company. Where am I today? Where could I be if I look in the right spots and understand where do I have this hidden money that could be freed and allow me as a company to be more profitable. It also means that we need to, as individuals, elevate our speed of change and the success of our change management strategies. Change management is an all-inclusive subject that a lot of companies get tripped up with. As they're trying to drive change, they forget the human element. What does that mean with humans? And how do we engage every single employee in the entire company to go on that journey with us? Lastly, we need to infuse higher agility, faster problem solving, and the critical thinking that is required to engage and drive that improvement across all elements. So here's a question for you. What if you could outpace the competition by 175 to 400%? Here's an example of manufacturing in the 90s, 2000s, up through 2016. And it's an example of US companies that have driven transformation and the amount of productivity they've been able to deliver versus the other manufacturing companies in the same sectors. So what would that do for your company if you were able to outpace your competition? What would that do for you as an individual if you were able to bring that to your company? So now let's get into some of the meat of today. What we want to do is understand profit and performance potential. As we're looking at the entire company, you want to first understand, am I fixing a problem or am I in a relatively stable and growing company and now I'm elevating the performance? Two different answers, two different approaches. So let's look at what I mean by that. When your car is broken, you take it to mechanic. Now, in some cases, we have clients that reach out to us and they say, this element of the company is broken. Now, that requires a well-trained individual to go in and understand what's truly going on and how do we fix it in order to get it running again. Or you could be in a good, well-run company, and now you're looking at, how do I elevate the performance? How do I go from a normal car to a NASCAR level type of performance within my company? Another analogy is looking at when you go to the doctor. You have symptoms. Now, symptoms are not necessarily what's truly the root cause. And that's where we want to take a step back and understand the root cause in order to fix it. Or we want to become Olympic athletes. We want to be able to perform at the absolute best and help everyone around us perform at that same level within the company. So here's a quick story. For a number of you who are in various size companies, I was once in your shoes, where I was brought in to a company in Maine who, what I didn't realize until after I had accepted the position, it was that particular company was part of an enterprise multiple division enterprise level company. That particular site was below the red line. So what happens if you're below the red line in a large company? That means you're a candidate for closure. Now, that wasn't a well-run company taking performance higher. That was we need to figure out what we need to do to fix it and fix it quickly. What we all decided, the entire leadership team, was to roll up our sleeves, get our hands dirty, and make sure everyone in the entire site was aligned and start pulling in the right direction. What happened over that 6 years is we had 5 different product lines, and by the end of the 6th year, we had 3 product lines that were best cost globally. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you're going to close, there's no chance of outsourcing because the best cost to produce those products was being done right in the site in Maine. We had another product line that was equal to best cost. And then we had a 5th one that was a candidate to offshore. What does that all mean? That means the stability of the site elevated over those 6 years. We went from fix it to now elevating the performance and continuing the journey from there. Now, a lot of what we're going to talk about today, we infused and implemented in this example that I just shared. So over those 6 years, for those of you that are, looking at the financials, and me being a CFO, I'm always looking at the financials. We were able to increase net sales by 39%, sales per associate by 27%, but here is the best part. Operating income, we were able to increase by 567%. So by the time we were done with that transformation, a lot of other sites were coming to Maine to figure out what we did, to share best practices and to take those back to their companies. That's the aspiration, that's the goal that I would have for everyone on the call today. So let's get into what are the different areas. There are 6 different areas, and every single one of these areas, there's at least, and this is going off of 30 years of experience of doing this, there's at least 10 to 20% of productivity that can be found in every one of these 6 areas. Now, why do I say that? Because I've been doing that, and my team has been doing that with client companies for the last 9 years, the time I've been with Win Enterprises. So in the spirit of time, today, we only have time to get into 2 of the areas. And we'll get into that detail here in a second. But what I challenge you, as we're going through these 2 areas, I challenge you to consider what's possible, to think outside the box, and to explore the possibilities of what's going on in your company. Now, some of these examples we're going to go into, they're going to spark a lot of thoughts and ideas in your mind. Those are the ones that you want to take and write down all these ideas that are coming up. Some will have much bigger impact and some will have less. But the point is, want to start envisioning what it could look like in your company as we go through these different ideas. You want to also get with the finance group and understand the numbers. Have them help to figure out, well, what is the true impact to our bottom line with each of these different ideas? And as you're doing that, that's going to further support you as you're driving more improvement further and faster. So when they help you to predict the value, there may be a range, and that's okay. What you want to do is you want to get in the ballpark so you can have those conversations to drive the ideas. Now, in the handout section, you're going to see a short worksheet that I would ask you to download and reference as we're going through this. The 2 areas that we're going to dive deep into today are P&L, profit and loss optimization, and balance sheet health. Okay, so let's get into profit and loss. What we're going to talk about is 2 areas that within the profit and loss have significant impact and we can reference relatively quickly within your company. So if you have access to your P&L, within the P&L, you have COGS, or cost of goods sold. Now, within your cost of goods sold, there's 3 categories: my material cost, my labor cost, and my overhead cost. Okay, so we'll get into that here in a second. And then you have SG&A, and we have 2 areas there that we want to dive into: internal versus outside services, and insurance 401k administration. In each section, we start with a higher level, and then we'll dig into the detail. So what I mean by that is cost of goods sold. Here's an example where when we work with our clients, we help them identify what is a world-class breakout or percentage of each of the 3 categories between material, labor, and overhead. So here's an example where world-class, and there's a lot of nuance here that we'll get into, but within this, 38% is material, and this is a manufacturing sector type business. 10% is labor, and 52% is overhead. Okay, so within that, here's an example where in this company, at the beginning, you can see the percentages. Towards the end, you can see the shift where the labor was less, labor content, the overhead percentage was bigger, but that's only part of the story. The other part of the story is, in this company, gross profit increased from 20% to 40%. Now, what could that do for your company if you were able to increase your gross profit by 10 to 20% over a period of time? What would that additional profit allow you to do for additional projects, to invest back into growing your company? So now we saw what we targeted for material, labor, and overhead. Let's dig into material. A lot of companies, and this being a group where I assume a number of you are in the quality function, a lot of companies, when they're looking at cost of poor quality, they may only be looking at scrap and rework. Where a lot of the hidden money shows up is in the other three categories that you see on the screen. You see underutilization. And what does that mean for potential additional profit? Warranty costs and lost sales. So if you take all four of those all together, and then you measure that total against your sales, you get a percentage. Now, industry average in manufacturing and service companies for total cost of poor quality typically amounts to 5 to 30% of gross sales. Industry average, 15 to 20. World class, less than 2%. So where's your company today? Are you an industry average, or are you an industry leader? And how many dollars are sitting there that with the right focus, the right problem solving, you can help drop that to the bottom line? Supply chain. Here's an interesting fact, is in a number of companies, enhancing your supply chain typically yields 20 to 30% of material savings in the first 12 to 18 months. What's your material spend today, and what would that yield? When is the last time that there has been a detailed spend analysis and research on what are the different commodity sectors that you're currently playing in? What is your current spend compared to best cost? And where are the big opportunities? It's very different than assuming a price increase year over year. It's getting into and looking at how do you proactively drive an improved supply chain and reduce your material cost. The other is, how are you working with your external suppliers? What are the opportunities there? What does poor supplier performance do to your operation? And how does that cascade all the way through the corporation? Internally, how well is the entire organization aligned with the outside sales, and how are you aligning your internal operation to providing the right product in the right quantity at the right time? Okay, let's get into labor for a second. Within labor, when is the last time there's been discussion talking about, man, that was a bad hire. We just didn't interview right, and that individual cost us time and money. Where the big opportunity here is looking at how does your company compare with voluntary turnover and total turnover, which includes involuntary turnover. And how does that, if you did the math, how does that compare to really elevate and show how big of a problem you have or what is a big opportunity? To understand what is the total number of employees, how often are employees either voluntary or involuntary leaving, and how does that compare to the industry average, and what kind of dollars are you tying up that you could be freed up if you look at the entire hiring, onboarding, and growing the employee process in your company. In this example, in this particular company, they identified it was close to $8 million. $8 million of opportunity that they were ignoring until they really dug into to understand their labor sector of their business. Okay, safety. Everyone here's talk about safety. What are some big costs? Now, one of the things that, in my past, we actually used the cost avoidance justification for a number of our safety programs. When you look at what is the cost of an injury, what is the cost of a worker being out, and how do we reduce that cost and become a safer, more desirable place to work? Incident rate is the way to go after this one. In this example, what you would want to do is look at your total number of recordable cases and compare that to the industry average. Now, what is the world-class average in the bottom right of this? What's the industry average? And what is the hidden cost that your company may be incurring? Big companies, they have individuals, and that's all they do is look at how do I grow a safer environment within and across all the divisions, all the plants. So here's another big area that sometimes is overlooked as far as what is the total cost, the hidden cost that I could be really helping to drive. I want to introduce you, Jana. Jana, at the time, was the VP of Finance for a mid-size aerospace company. And we worked with Jana multiple times over a span of 7 years. Now, the point is not to read this entire thing for you, but I want to call out a couple things. One is, first, identifying what is the true potential. That's what you want to, that's what we're doing today. The next piece of that is to get buy-in and to really engage the employees. Now, in this particular example, what we did is we did a diagnostic, like we're talking about today, where we identified 15 million in balance sheet improvement and 5 million in conversion cost. So when I talk about conversion cost, I'm talking about positive impact to the P&L. And the 15 million, that was actually in inventory, which shows up as a one-time good guy to the balance sheet. Okay, let's keep going. SG&A. SG&A stands for Selling, General, and Administrative Expenses. What is the percentage of SG&A compared to the competition, and where's your company today? There are tons of benchmarks out there for you to look at. Some of the best benchmarks are more proprietary and you need to have access to them, where we have access to proprietary database that we review where the client companies are versus where their competition is, and we go line by line. In this example, this is more of a public reference where you can look at what is the SG&A expense as a percentage of sales within your industry sector, and then understanding how big of an opportunity is sitting right there. Outside services. Now, this is a controversial topic where some companies have gone to the extreme and they've outsourced almost everything other than the core activity, and other companies do it very, very selectively. What's right for your company is for you to decide. So some areas of outsourcing services include the 5 that are listed here. One of the things to take a look at is if it is truly non-critical to the core of your business, does it make sense? Can you do it and still provide a high level of service both internally to the internal customers and minimal to zero impact to your external customers? Companies typically save 12 to 17% as compared to in-house. This is yet another area that sometimes makes sense for certain companies. For other companies, it doesn't. That's for you to decide. Okay, so now I just gave you a whole bunch of stuff to think about on the P&L. Just keeping a close eye on time. Let's get into the balance sheet. So within your balance sheet, the 3 areas that I want to talk about is inventory, accounts receivable, and accounts payable. Now, dead or obsolete inventory. How often is this a hot topic in your company? Now, consider that well-run companies, the percentage of dead or obsolete inventory is less than 5 to 7%. Now, if you add all the hidden cost and the holding cost and everything associated with that inventory, it could be as much as 25 to 30% of more than the inventory's unit cost value. So how often is that being reviewed? What space is that taking up? From a quality perspective, when we have a quality issue, how do we dispose of that inventory properly so it doesn't sit in the corner? Now here's out the other side. This is the good inventory. What are the inventory turns? Now, the inventory turns is a relatively common ratio out there. And when you look at your company, how often are you turning the inventory compared to your competition? Now, why is this important? This is important because inventory turns are a direct reflection on how much cash you have tied up in inventory versus cash you have freed up to invest in other things. Now, when we were at Wiremold, we started the journey and our inventory turns were at 3.4. That means 3.4 turns per year. And over the span of the 9 years, you'll see that we increase inventory turns from 3.4 to 15.8. Compared to our competition, we were turning that inventory so fast that we had all the extra cash freed up to invest in employee activities, buying other companies, and in improving the processes that we had in place. Okay, let's talk about accounts receivable and accounts payable for a second. Receivables ratio is looking at the ratio between receivables and how quickly you're turning those. Oh, sorry, went back. And how quickly you're turning that compared to your competition. So you want to take a look at what are the terms. Now, in some companies, you have hidden cash because the policy may be we're going to pay all the invoices that come to us within 30 days, but we're getting money from our customers within 60 days. So you have a cash imbalance that you want to take a look at. So that's one area that we could spend probably the next hour just talking about that whole sector. But instead, let's go ahead and look at some examples. So here's some examples of work that we've done with various clients. This is a smaller size company, 100 to 150 million. It's been sanitized to protect that client. And what we found was 10 to 25% productivity opportunity, 8 to 10% material productivity, and greater than 10 million in inventory reduction. Doing a lot of the same things we're talking about today. Here's another example, 50 to 75 million, so it's even smaller company. 3 million in cost reduction, over 4 million in revenue increase. And lastly, one of the smallest examples here, 28 to 37% in labor, 10 to 15 in overhead, and over 1 million in inventory reduction, freeing up that cash. So you heard me talking about wire mold, and where I learned and where the team learned a lot of the foundational elements that really drive this productivity and these examples. Here are some of the results that we were able to achieve in the 10 years that Pete was there and the 11 years that I was there. Pete, by the way, is my business partner and our CEO of Win Enterprises. So when we look at some of the metrics and what does that mean for a company, here are some examples of what we were able to achieve. Now, one of the big things that I want to call your attention to is not only the lead time, but look at the EBITDA margin increase from 6.2 to 20.8 over that span of time. Metrics speak for themselves. So you can see some of the different examples. Inventory turns, bottom left, we already spoke about. Top right, we're looking at the gross profit improvement. And then the employee productivity. And the way that we measured that was sales per associate. So you can see that increase over time. Imagine what your company could achieve if they were able to achieve similar results as these. Some other quick case studies, different types of companies. where we have engineering, consumer products, aerospace, and healthcare. And you can see a lot of the similar results that I spoke about earlier. Now, hopefully you would agree that this has been a ton of information so far. Here's the thing, we only touched on 2 of the 6 categories. Imagine what we could find if we looked at the other 4 categories that we had listed earlier. So I want to leave you with an opportunity. Here's the information for our website. And in this site, you can find more information on diagnostics and more of what we look for when we're working with different companies. Now, the challenge that you have today is to take everything that you learned and to look at your company and identify what are the opportunities that you could achieve, that you could help your company achieve by looking in these areas where we have identified hidden cash or hidden profitability for you and your company. I'll leave you with a quote. Abraham Lincoln, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." The first 4 finding the opportunities within my company, laying them out, and figure out which are the best ones to strategically go after first. So hopefully you found this a lot of really good information, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you, David.
I'll take it back to you.
Okay, thank you, David. We have a couple questions. The first one is, and I'm not sure what this individual heard, but it says, what is the difference between a transformation company and a manufacturing company? Perhaps use that terminology.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. They're both, in the example, they're both manufacturing companies. A transformational company, in the example that I used, are companies where the leadership team looks at how do we really drive significant breakthrough improvement over a short period of time? And how do we do that in a way that elevates our service to our customers and our quality that we're delivering out to the world? So it's more of a mindset between normal manufacturing and transformational manufacturing.
Okay, thank you. As you speak to that, you did mention something, this is my question, around AI learning, the latest and greatest really technology that's been out there for a while, but that's, I think, really gaining tons of traction. You worked in some companies that have adopted that, and what have been the results of that, especially from a financial impact?
So the results have really varied depending on the example, but I'll give you a couple different specific examples. Companies have really encouraged and utilized machine learning and AI to capture more what's the true performance of the machines and how are they operating, and what specifically actions that I can take to allow those machines to run better and more effectively so that I eliminate or greatly reduce breakdowns. Okay, that's one example. The other is, within creating the designs for the product, there are elements that you can use AI and machine learning to have that process be faster And in that case, in both examples, it comes down to what is all levels of leadership, what's all levels of leadership's outlook on when and where to use that cutting edge technology versus not, and how open-minded are they.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. The next one was, I think we are industry average. What companies are world-class in, I think they meant to say in the cost of poor quality.
So cost of poor quality, one company to look at, and I know a fair amount of the data is not publicly available, but they are a public company, and there's divisions within Danaher that are absolutely best cost globally when it comes to cost of poor quality. So that would be one place to kind of dig into and see what you're able to compare your company to a division within Danaher would be one example.
Okay, thank you. On shown cases on inventory reduction savings, how was this achieved? Via sales increase or spending just in time or anything else?
So within a lot of the inventory reduction, there's a number of levers that you can take a look at, understanding and then pulling. The first is it's an approach that is called plan for every part. So PFEP. And what that does is it looks at the forecasting of every single part, and based on the parameters you set within that approach, it gives you a clear understanding of what's possible. Okay, so rather than just doing a across the board, let's reduce safety stock, that never turns out right. Adjusting and looking at dynamics and doing more of a comprehensive analysis, that's a great start. And then you engage the sales team on really dialing in the forecast accuracy and potentially reducing the complexity across your organization. So where there's 25 of the same type of item, can we reduce that down to maybe 10? And in that 10, I can make that more productively and faster, so I can respond quicker to my clients, to my customers, and then that's another lever to reduce the inventory. So there's a lot of different ways, and I would say message me offline and we can get into much more detail if you'd like.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that offer. Looks like another question. My company, healthcare, wants to get to the bottom line quickly. Which focus areas would you suggest to get the biggest bang for the buck, per se, to start with for a good financial view?
So healthcare is quite interesting.
Yes, it is.
I spent a year in healthcare in a very, very large hospital in the Northeast. And the way that we approach this is we approached it from how we flow care to the patient and how we understand what are the issues that the patient is running into. And we approach it from that perspective for a couple reasons. One, everybody's an individual. So within healthcare, if you're trying to drive it to the bottom line faster, look at how many potential patients you actually lose because they go elsewhere because of the care that they receive is not ideal. Now, that leakage is a metric that not a lot of healthcare organizations truly track. So imagine if you could reduce the leakage in your healthcare organization. What if you could cut that in half? What would that mean for increased revenue? And what would that mean for increased profit for your company? So that's one area. Another heavy within healthcare is inventory. And being able to dial in the inventory to have it the right quantity at the right time. And the third area that you want to take a look at is you want to look at complexity across your organization. Now, what I mean by that is, in one example, we had a surgical department, and in the example I'm sharing, every surgeon had their separate tray of utensils that they brought into the surgery room. So imagine that complexity on and the cost associated with having all those different customized trays going into surgery. And one of the projects was to reduce that down to, and I think they got to, if memory serves, 2 trays that all the surgeons agreed to. And the amount of savings, because that complexity was removed, was significant. And I can't get into a lot of the details. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Next one is, how difficult is it to employ this program in an older manufacturing environment that is part of a large international conglomerate that only has a few manufacturing sites? I guess manufacturing is a very small part of this conglomerate.
And I'm going to assume this individual is in one of the manufacturing sites?
Yeah, I don't know. Good question.
Okay, so
maybe Kent, if you're still on, you can answer that question via the question box.
So here's an example. When I joined Newell Rubbermaid.
Yes, he said yes, sorry.
Okay, so when I joined Newell Rubbermaid, and the example I gave, the company in Maine, Irwin Tools, that was one of multiple manufacturing sites. Here's the interesting thing, is what we drove up there was what the team locally decided to drive. Now, I was fortunate, I was the one leading the team. And what I had to do is I had to very strategically communicate to upper leadership what we were doing and why. And within a very short period of time, the results that we were delivering, they very quickly backed off and let us do what we knew we could do up in that plant. So here's your challenge is, if you're in an older manufacturing site, you want to take a look at what is the local leadership, what's the local leadership mindset, and what are the capabilities that you have versus the capabilities that you need to acquire or bring in order to drive that significant improvement. And then when you're delivering those significant results very quickly, you will grab a bunch of attention from the organization. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, and it looks like one more question.
Okay.
What type of tools are you utilizing for assessing risk when evaluating the strategy of your pursuits or the pursuits?
Can you say that question one more time, Ellen?
What type of tools are you utilizing for assessing risk when evaluating the strategy of your pursuits?
That's a very broad question. What we have developed over time is a rather detailed risk matrix. And depending on what part of the company we are working within, we have a set of risk areas to be aware of and to then assess how much or little impact those risks are. So to give you an example is if we are looking at the overall organizational structure, there's a list of risks if we're looking at making significant changes that we need to make sure we factor into that strategy. I'm not sure if I'm answering that question or not, but
Yeah, I would assume that you have a fairly comprehensive, rigorous tool to assess that risk, like many companies, and that it is proprietary in your case. But
it is.
I think you would say that there is an access to building those, what it takes to build maybe those kinds of risk tools and what to put in them and what to think about them. That may be something that folks can start to look at. So.
There is, yes. And the list that I'm referring to, we didn't create overnight. We created it over the span of the 30 years. And as we continue, going further, we add to it and we refine it. So there's a lot of really good articles and information out there. It just takes time to reference and to develop that list for yourself.
And that would make sense. All right, we are almost at the top of the hour. Again, appreciate your time in the last hour and sharing your knowledge. And if it sounds like David said he's willing to answer some questions if you want to email him. And other than that, I hope you can access the handout. And a reminder that, again, we will have a webinar in October, on October 13th, and we hope to see you then. Thank you again, David, for your time. Great presentation.
Thank you. Everybody take care.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye.